Senator Bernie Sanders, the morning after the debate in Houston. Great to be with you.
Good to be with you.
All right. So let's get started. Look, as people think about who to vote for, two issues, of course, always pop up. Electability and then policies. And I would add a third, which is, can you get the policies actually accomplished?
This is Cenk Uygur having a conversation with one independent senator from Vermont running as a Democrat, Bernie Sanders. Now, a bit of news happened, especially from the standpoint of circles on the left, but it bubbled up into mainstream in a way that ended up just being an outright smear job. I'm remiss to have to defend Cenk Uygur on this, but I kind of have to. I mean, it's that egregious. Bernie Sanders, right now, new poll, PBS. Biden and Sanders at the top. Biden leads 24%, Sanders 22%. And this is, again, a trend. The election has become about Biden and Sanders. Everyone else is taking up the rear. Sanders will need people to effect his will in Congress. It is true that you can yell at them, and yelling at them does have somewhat of a shaming effect, but it needs to, especially if he wants to get all of this stuff passed, yes, public sentiment, but also people who are in Congress that are attentive to that. Katie Hill was taken out in a sex scandal. Cenk Uygur is running in her seat. While running in her seat, Cenk Uygur, who has a relationship with Bernie Sanders, because again, the Young Turks pushed Sanders pretty heavily in 2016. I mean, whatever you want to think of Uygur, whatever you want to think of what the Young Turks has become, it goes without saying that that network was to the left of the Democratic Party. And it may be a tick to the left of MSNBC, but let's just be clear, when it started, it was out of orthodoxy. I mean, for the most part, they were antagonistic to the party itself. And whether that was Cenk being on MSNBC yelling at congressmen, or whether that was him on MSNBC yelling at congressmen, for the most part, they did have, let's say, a policy prescription that would be in line with something Sanders would push for. And in the 2016 election, before jumping on board for Hillary Clinton, they were amazing at pushing for Sanders. So, right here, Bernie Sanders endorsement to Cenk Uygur. And right here, I'm endorsing Cenk because I know he would serve ordinary people, not powerful special interests. He's a voice that we desperately need in Congress and will be a great representative for California 25 in the country. For many years, Cenk has been one of the outstanding progressive journalists in our country. He has shown enormous courage in standing up to the greed and power of the corporate elites and has spent his entire life fighting for justice and the needs of working people in our country. It goes on, but you get the point. It's an endorsement. Right here. LA Times. Bernie Sanders endorses California who defends crude sex rating of women. Now, this is something that happened, I think, like a decade or so ago, and he apologized for it. And I got to be honest, I think I've grown out of this thing of when they showed Northam in blackface like 20 or 30 years ago. I thought to myself, that was 20, 30 years ago. What is the person now? And is it possible that I grow as a human being? That type of stuff comes into play. Either way, of all of Uygur's accomplishments, meaning the things that he's pushing for, they are to the left. And the crude sex rating women, again, 10, 20 years ago, I don't know if that should be disqualifying. But nevertheless, this is the way they cast him. They can cast him in all sorts of ways, by the way. Progressive journalists, Bernie Sanders endorses, person who was outlet of TYT, etc. All sorts of ways. They have absolute vision in determining how they want to present this. And this is the way they do it. They smear him. Here's another one. New York Times. Bernie Sanders retracts endorsement of Cenk Uygur after criticism. Now, the catch here is, listen to this part. Mr. Uygur, a longtime supporter of Mr. Sanders, has also disparaged Barack Obama on his show, argued that bestiality should be legal, and hosted white supremacist figures, including David Duke. In one clip circulated on Twitter, Mr. Duke ends an interview by saying, "I am not what you call a racist," of which Mr. Uygur replies, "Of course not." This is the article. Now, whatever you want to think of Uygur, call him a con man, call him whatever. This is not a subjective opinion. This is objective reality where you can actually determine whether or not X or Y is true. Yes, he did disparage Obama. Fair enough. A lot of lefties do. That's not an issue. Argue that bestiality should be legal? Are you fucking kidding me? Hosted white supremacist David Duke. Now, this is my point. These are objective reality. We should be able to go to those clips, observe those clips, and determine whether or not what she's saying is accurate. Well, I just so have the clips that they're talking about so we can kind of just see. Here's the David Duke one. It's quick.
Name me one anti-Semitic person.
I say that
you can't.
The Jewish organized
David, how can you think you're not anti-Semitic? How could you possibly think that you think the Jews control the world? That's anti-Semitism 101.
Give you another quotation.
Kagan is on the Supreme Court, but so is Sotomayor, and she's definitely not Jewish. She's Latina. I mean, Kagan made it on.
Within 15 seconds, you can get the sense of how this interview is going. He is ridiculing him. I actually watched this interview. He ridiculed him almost from jump. And when he's saying, of course not, he is clearly being sarcastic. Now, does the person who wrote this in the New York Times not know that? Does she not know that? Is it lazy journalism or is it intentionally trying to smear a lefty? And I would argue this is taking place on both sides of the globe. California and New York. Is it possible that the person that the Democratic Party wants is not Uygur? And if it is possible that that person is not Uygur, is it also possible that these guys have access to journalists? Now the catch here is, of course we know politicians have their journalists that they feed information to or give information to or have connections within the context of the party. This just seems a little too, coincidental to happen at the exact same time, allowing his political opponent to hit him, which, by the way, led to Sanders dropping his endorsement. Cenk Uygur has been a longtime fighter for corruption. However, our movement is bigger than any one person. I hear my supporters who are frustrated and understand their concerns. Cenk today said he is rejecting all endorsements for his campaign, and I retract my endorsement. So then in the course of a few days, Cenk gets a big endorsement from Sanders. I think he got one from Turner, and I think he got one from Ro Khanna. He gets smeared in the LA Times, the New York Times. In fact, he gets smeared in a way in the New York Times that is easily, demonstratively BS. This is the bestiality video that they're talking about.
I have decided what that Boing Boing chick was doing. Mm-hmm. She was doing a jaywalking of bestiality. Like, yeah, it might technically be a crime, but let's not waste the court's time on jaywalk.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, fair enough.
But here comes the controversial part, the part I shouldn't say. I believe that if I were the benevolent dictator of the world, I would legalize bestiality where you are giving, where you are pleasuring the animal. You see what I'm saying? Okay. Now why? Why did that happen? It's the dumbest thing I've said.
It really is the dumbest thing you said.
No, I'll tell you why. Because there's was the case that we covered where there was a guy or a girl or something that was pleasuring a horse, and the horse came to a conclusion, right? So who got harmed?
You know that people who are, okay, look, not to be a downer about what you're saying, because what you're saying sounds kind of funny, but a lot of people who are being raped.
It actually sounds a lot of funny, if I'm being honest. This sounds like some shit I'd say. If I ran for politics, I would imagine there'd be an ass video out there of me, and I will be proud as a peacock. Oh, they're showing my ass video. The catch here is, he's clearly joking. He's clearly joking. Anybody in their right mind can look at this video and say Uygur is joking. And again, this is some shit that I'd say. So I look at this and be like, he's not being serious. Now, the New York Times, for whatever reason, doesn't know that, or didn't look at that video and come away with that assessment. They came away with that video saying, This guy thinks bestiality should totally be legal and people should be able to suck off horses. My question is, should Sanders have dumped him? That's my question. Yes, a long lead in, but I needed to show all of this stuff because the actual question I want to get to is, and the thing that I think is more interesting than not, is whether or not it was right for Sanders to drop, but for all intents and purposes, is an ally. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. Oh, contributor appreciation will be this evening at 6 o'clock. So I don't know if Mrs. Thomas is going to join me, but I'm going to push her to do so. But 6 p.m. either way. This story was interesting to me. And it's interesting to me in terms of whether or not it is right for Sanders to drop Uygur. For all of Uygur's issues that I have with him and the network, meaning this kind of tilt hard to this kind of democratic synergy of sorts, they are not what they say he is. At least I don't think he is. I do think he is a tick to the left of the Democratic Party, and I do think if he was in office, he would push for Sanders' priorities. Catch. Sanders is in a political campaign. And Sanders, who's running in that political campaign, has to make decisions about who he backs and who he doesn't, and who he aligns himself with. Because whoever he aligns himself with is a person that he can be used or can be attacked by. It's horrific, just the way politics goes. There's an insincerity about it, but that insincerity is played up by media and everything else in order to attack the candidate. I have two strands of thought on this. George Galloway has a saying that if you run, they chase you your whole life. And my feeling is if you're going to give an endorsement, you stick with the endorsement. Unless I suppose it's utterly atrocious, but all things being equal, if you're endorsing somebody, you better know who you are endorsing. Corbyn in the UK dumped Williamson and dumped Galloway. And he aligned himself with people who hated his guts, meaning he took policies from people who did not like him and did not want to see him prosper, and he did not prosper. And at the moment that he didn't prosper, they said it was all his fault. We were doomed from the start. We knew that this person wasn't right for the etc., etc., etc. I'm not a big proponent of dumping friends. This is kind of my point of Gabbard supported Sanders in 2016. At the very least, she gets my benefit of the doubt and my tangential support in this case. But whatever you want to think of Cenk, he did create a network. That network has been to the left of the party, and that network was instrumental in getting people like AOC's news out, getting Sanders and his supporters almost like this kind of nerve center of sorts. It has been, all things being equal, what I would argue productive, even though I don't necessarily like the tilt that it's typically gone, at least recently. Without any equivocation, he's a policy ally, meaning there's certain policies that he may take that you don't particularly like, but ultimately, from the grand scheme of things, he's an ally on issues of getting policy accomplished. These attacks on him are mostly unhinged. And the catch is mostly, fucking catch is mostly. So an argument can be made that, look, if Sanders is going to back away from Cenk, what about Ilhan Omar? What about Linda Sarsour? People who are going to be attacked as being anti-Semitic, or the party itself attacked them as being anti-Semitic. Is he going to cut and run when it's difficult for people like that? I think there's a difference. I do think there may be a difference. Listen to the attack that his opponent gave. You saw the two articles. LA Times, New York Times, salacious articles attacking Cenk. Right here. This is his opponent. Until now, I haven't engaged directly with Cenk Uygur, but this is further disqualifying. On behalf of the people of faith everywhere, stop calling yourself a progressive. Being a sexist, homophobic, genocide-denying racist is the opposite of being a progressive. People deserve better. They hit him with it all. They hit him with it all. They hit him with everything. Racist, homophobic, genocide denying, sexist. Jesus fucking Christ. I gotta be honest, I don't think he's most of those things. I don't think he's sexist. He says shit, but he's a guy. And I know I say he's a guy, but I'm saying this from the standpoint of you can't. This is a policy issue. This is not a thought crime issue. I guess that's my point. Homophobic, I don't think that at all. I don't think you have any policy to push that it's going to make him homophobic. Genocide denying, let's get back to that one. Racist, I don't. Like, this is kind of the point, right? I mean, all of these things are identity issue slanders, with the exception of one. And I think the one is his problem. Take a look at this. This passed, a few days ago. Turkey blasts USF Senate passed resolution recognizing Armenian genocide. Speaking Saturday at the Doha Forum, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu echoed his own earlier statements that those who supported the resolution are cowards. They're cowards. Or they are proponents of history. Or they realize history as being history, as told by most historians. The United States House and Senate has just passed resolutions recognizing the Armenian genocide. Now, this is a big deal because Turkey still denies that the Armenian genocide ever took place. The catch is, it did take place, especially from this
I'm deeply grateful to Senator Cruz for his forward leadership on this issue.
Especially from the perspective of historians. Now, Uygur, for the longest time, denied that this genocide took place. Denied it. He was called to account on it and eventually said, okay, fair enough, it took place. Problem. This interview that Bernie Sanders is doing with Uygur,
and so
it's taking place on a network named The Young Turks. The Young Turks was literally the movement and the power source that carried out the Armenian genocide. 1.5 million Armenians. Now, whatever you want to give their reasoning for doing it, there's reasons that people thought the Armenians might have been fighting for the other side. Whatever. It took place. It's understood to take place. Whatever you want to say is reasons for disbelieving this, call it cultural, call it whatever. His network is named after the purveyors of that genocide. How do you support this? So if you're one Bernie Sanders and you're not thinking about it in these terms, our education system in this country have been somewhat flagrantly, woefully, let's say, underemphasized, if you want to make it that case. But if we called a group Hitler Youth Network, people would be like, whoa, you can't do that. But you can call it the Young Turks, which again was the purveyor of that genocide. Look it up. I've done videos on this before saying this was outrageous that they are able to keep their name. And by the way, this is in the context of them saying Redskins should change their name, and Niggerhead Ranch with what is his name, the governor senator Rick Scott, they should change their name, and they're running around here with a name that is glorifying purveyors of a genocide. Now, it is true that the Young Turks brought in a movement of reforms and those type of things into the Ottoman Empire, or you can say a collapsing Ottoman Empire. That's true. The reform thing is true. But Hitler brought reforms also. Like, I hope you understand what I mean. If somebody said this group is called the Hitler Youth, and they make the point, look, Hitler brought a lot of reforms and he put a lot of people to work and he gave all these people radios. And you're like, well, yeah, that's nice. But the issue here is the Holocaust, not the reforms. And I'm making the point that the same thing is true here. The issue here is not the reforms. The issue here is the genocide. Is this untenable for Sanders to be on a network named after a genocide? And is it untenable for Sanders to support somebody who has a network named after a genocide. Call it reformers all you want. At the end of the day, those reformers committed a genocide. This is where I have my qualms, right? In one sense, you could say he's an ally, you shouldn't dump your allies, etc., etc. But her attack on this, even though much of it is unhinged, this part, by definition of his own show, the name of his own network, is true. It has to be, right? Otherwise, how do you name your network after some group that committed a genocide? I'm not going to belabor the point. I guess my point is it right for Sanders to pull out of this? This is not a situation of Ilhan Omar and the way that she goes about her affairs. And Linda Sarsour, at this point, I think he's pinned himself to her, so he's stuck with her either way. But the Uygur thing is a little different in regards to an attack point. And I think that attack point might actually be real. Like I said, this other stuff is unhinged. But if this woman goes on television in a debate and she said he named his network after a group that committed a genocide, he doesn't believe this genocide took place. Why wouldn't she say that? She's already said this other unhinged shit. Sexist, homophobic, racist, etc., etc. Why wouldn't she say it? And would that be used to attack Sanders? If your name is Bernie Sanders, do you know? Then if you don't know, do you make the assumption that, I don't want to dump the guy overboard, but my base will forgive me for this, and the risk is greater than any reward in backing him for an endorsement, even though all things being equal behind the scenes, everybody knows that he still has my blessing? Or is it more valuable to go with this thing of you don't dump your allies, even if they're flawed and even if they're denying genocides? I gotta be honest, I don't know the answer to that. And I suppose because I don't know the answer to that, it's possible that Sanders didn't either. Cenk asked politicians to withdraw endorsement. He asked them to withdraw endorsements because ultimately he didn't want to damage Sanders on this. Cenk is having a learning experience. Yes, he is. Frank Friel, who is vetting candidates for Bernie to endorse. Steve Schmidt. They should have known about all of this before endorsing Cenk. Love Bernie, but his staff looks incompetent. I gotta be honest, TYT has been a network for 10, 15 years? Cenk says this is a reform issue, and that's why I'm running with the name. Fair enough. And they've run with it. It's one of those things that people know at this point. Nobody says anything about. Everybody is cool with. And so fair enough. But now you're in an election. This is not you running a network. This is you in political office, and any and everything that you've said can be used against you, even out of fucking context. Like, the stuff that they're saying about him is so unhinged. They're attacking him. And by the way, the policy, the thing that she's coming in on this for, it has to do with a two-state policy. Well, a lot of people agree with that policy. That's not controversial in the least. His issue was the encampments and knocking down the encampments. And I suppose they're going to call him anti-Semitic for being on board for Palestinian rights. I find this to be extraordinary, though. The level to which they are going after him. I mean, two major papers, LA Times, New York Times. The political person who jumps in on it, adding in genocide denying. And it draws blood, right? Because Sanders pulls back his endorsement. Or he accepts Uygur's withdrawing of an endorsement. Let's say it that way. What's right? And of course, right, I just mean in the context of I suppose him getting elected. I love Ric Flair. Vote Ric Flair. I think Cenk has made some mistakes, but he's evolved. This is a situation where Bernie is between a rock and a hard place. This is yeah, agreed. Francis Dasta, yes, agreed. He's a rock and a hard place. Because he's winning California right now. So the issue becomes, I think the issue is like, how do I do the least harm with the maximum of reward? Of course, obvious in any situation. But ideology plays into that too. It's not just least harm. Yeah, that's a rock and a hard place. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer. DNC is anti-TYT. Well, yes, that I think is true. But by the same token, the content that TYT has been put out has been, for the most part, MSNBC just with a tweak. With a minor tweak. Scott, Gary, good ones take. Oh, thank you, Scott. Well, I mean, look, I think Cenk, I've endorsed Cenk for that seat. I don't live in California. Because whatever you want to think of him, I do think he is a rabble-rouser. I do think he's a fighter in this case. I do think, at the very least, he's internalized this notion of lefty values, even if it's not in the way that we would always agree with in the sense of foreign policy, or even in the sense of the way we agree with Trump. But from a policy position, he will be an ally, I think. The network has drifted in alignment with the Democratic Party, primarily because they're terrified of Trump and they hate Trump. And so the network organizes with MSNBC and CNN, and it's all this kind of rah-rah hate Trump stuff. That has alienated some lefties, oddly enough, not because those lefties love Trump, but because they thought Trump was a symptom of the problem and not the problem in and of itself. And all of the focus on Trump misses the issue that the problem, to some degree, is the DNC itself. Nothing gets changed with the DNC the way it is. And the overall focus on Trump misses this other stuff. But nevertheless, he's in politics now. You know, it's funny. People talk about Bloomberg, how Bloomberg News said they wouldn't go after Bloomberg or the other candidates, meaning they, for the most part, have to just not go after their boss. TYT was started by Cenk Uygur, and you have this news network, and they're like, all right, yeah, we're handing this over to Anna. No issue. It's like, come on, let's be honest. You are not going to ding your boss. You're not going to ding your boss. All right, I'm going to end this. Like, share, subscribe. I'll be back in a few. I'm going to be on By Any Means Necessary this evening at 3 p.m. But patron contributor appreciation is going to be at 6. So I'll see you guys momentarily.